Welcome to the Troubadour podcast. Today we'll be reading The Complaint of a Forsaken Indian Woman by William Wordsworth in his Lyrical Ballads of 1798. Now, this is considered one of his more far-reaching poems for a couple of particular reasons, but one, unlike many of his other poems, it doesn't have what is considered a mediating narrative voice. So there's not, like, if you've been watching a lot of the videos and listening to the podcast, you'll know that there's a speaker who's describing a scene. Now, sometimes that scene takes place heavily in the mind of the person, as in a female vagrant. It's a woman who's talking, but there's also a mediating other wanderer. So it's two wanderers meeting by Stonehenge, and the female primarily tells her story, but there are 5 important lines that help frame and structure the whole poem and give you an idea of how to interpret it in a sense too. In the poem, The Old Man Traveling, that we've done, you get the same kind of thing where it's actually a narrator who's sketching out this idea, this visual of this old man just walking down the road. And then we learn something profound about him, and it's a revelatory experience for both the narrator and, if you're paying attention, you, the reader. In this poem, there is no mediating narrative voice. It's all done in the mind, or in the voice, the voice, quote unquote, but in a European voice, of course, of William Wordsworth. And he's giving it a European voice because that's his voice, but he's doing it in a way, expressing herself and what would be valuable to her, the Indian woman. Now, a couple things to take note before I read it. I want to just read it, and then we'll kind of explore it a little bit, but I don't want to give too much setup of the, what it's about and the structure of the story. It is more of it's more of a lyrical ballad than, for instance, Old Man Traveling. It does have a very strict, not harsh isn't the right word, but strict rhyme scheme, so it rhymes more than a lot of the other ones do. So take this into consideration when listening, though. In the title, complaint is a word with several meanings, historically an expression of grief. So it's not just like complaining about, just like, oh God, she never stops, or he never stops complaining about, didn't get, it's like Karen, right? We know about Karen these days. It's always complaining to the manager. It's like, oh, shut up, Karen. Jeez. Like, not that kind of complaint. This is a legitimate problem she's having. This is actual expression of true grief. And of course, what's happening is very, very tragic. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy. It's a plaintive poem, an outcry against injury, a statement of injustice. And forsaken means deserted, left solitary, a word with strong biblical associations. So the complaint of a forsaken, she's been forsaken, she's been abandoned by the people who are supposed to take care of her, is important. Now, before I read this, if you are someone who's going to take offense to a Westerner criticizing a Native American, an Indian culture, then shut this off, because you are going to be offended, because it is definitely a scathing critique of these Native Americans in this practice, which was a noted fact about how they actually operated. Now, by the way, I want to point out that Wordsworth is not uncritical of his own society. So this is not like he is saying, oh, they suck and we're great about everything. He's criticizing certain aspects, and he read a book that made, certain aspects of the human condition. He's an artist. And he read a book that said, oh my gosh, this woman who's thousands of miles away from me in America, where he's never been. And he read a book about this. This woman is exactly like this woman over here that's abandoned during the French Revolution, or this woman who's been abandoned because of changing laws in Britain, and now she no longer has a home because it's been eaten up by these industrialists, and that's the female vagrant we've explored. So it's the same kind of woman, but it's way over in another continent, way different culture, like dramatically different culture, Native American culture, and it's their practice, and yet he's still saying that, okay, there's something wrong with this, and this is bad. Okay, so let's go. I promise I wouldn't do too many prefatory remarks, but there it all was anyway. Um, Now there is he also, Wordsworth also included a prefatory remark here, which we are going to read. This is actually in his poem in the book. This actually takes 2 whole pages. It's not that long in here. It's like one somewhat long paragraph, but it's important because he wants to set up, again, this is a far reaching poem for him in that he doesn't know this woman. A lot of the sketches, he saw the people beforehand. Like he knew, when he did the poem on Simon Lee, he knew a person like that, right? Like his Lucy poems or his Matthew poems are aggregates of people and women he knew. This is drastically different. He doesn't know this person, and yet he's speaking in her voice. So he's trying to give some reasoning for that. So, okay, let's get started. I'm going to read this and then we'll talk a little bit more afterwards. The Complaint of a Forsaken Indian Woman by William Wordsworth. Prefatory note. When a northern Indian, from sickness, is unable to continue his journey with his companions, he is left behind, covered over with deer skins, and is supplied with water, food, and fuel if the situation of the place will afford it. He is informed of the track which his companions intend to pursue, and if he is unable to follow or overtake them, he perishes alone in the desert, unless he should have the good fortune to fall in with some other tribes of Indians. It is unnecessary to add that the females are equally or still more exposed to the same fate. See that very interesting work, Hearne's Journey from Hudson's Bay to the Northern Ocean, a book. When the northern lights, as the same writer informs us, vary their position in the air, they make a rustling and a crackling noise. That's Aurora Borealis. This circumstance is alluded to in the first stanza of the following poem. The Complaint. Before I see another day, oh, let my body die away. In sleep I heard the northern gleams. The stars, they were among my dreams. In sleep did I behold the skies. I saw the crackling flashes drive, and yet they are upon my eyes, and yet I am alive. Before I see another day, oh, let my body die away. My fire is dead. It knew no pain, yet it is dead, and I remain. All stiff with ice, the ashes lie, and they are dead, and I will die. When I was well, I wished to live, for clothes, for warmth, for food, and fire. But they to me no joy can give, no pleasure now, and no desire. Then here contented will I lie, alone I cannot fear to die. Alas, you might have dragged me on another day, a single one. Too soon despair o'er me prevailed, too soon my heartless spirit failed. When you were gone, my limbs were stronger, and oh, how grievously I rue, that afterwards, a little longer, my friends, I did not follow you. For strong and without pain I lay, my friends, when you were gone away. My child, they gave thee to another, a woman who was not thy mother. When from my arms my babe they took, on me how strangely did he look. Through his whole body something ran, a most strange something did I see, as if he strove to be a man, that he might pull the sledge for me. And then he stretched his arms, how wild! Oh, mercy, like a little child. My little joy, my little pride, in 2 days more I must have died. Then do not weep and grieve for me. I feel I must have died with thee. O wind that o'er my heart, over my herd art flying, The way my friends their course did bend, I should not feel the pain of dying. Could I with thee a message send? Too soon, my friends, you went away, for I had many things to say. I'll follow you across the snow. You travel heavily and slow. In spite of all my weary pain, I'll look upon you tense again. My fire is dead, and snowy white the water which beside it stood. The wolf has come to me tonight, and he has stolen away my food. Forever left alone am I, then wherefore should I fear to die? My journey will be shortly run, I shall not see another sun. I cannot lift my limbs to know if they have any life or no. My poor forsaken child, if I for once could have thee close to me, with happy heart then would I die. In my last thoughts would happy be. I feel my body die away. I shall not see another day. Okay, so that's the complaint. Now, there was one typo I saw in there, and I apologize from, we'll kind of go through that. It was not a major typo, but it definitely makes a difference to have the right words. So there's one typo that I kind of slipped up on, but I think it was good overall. Now, let me read a section from the book that is discussed here, which is Hearne's journey from Hudson Bay to the Northern Ocean. So this is a traveler who went on this journey. Samuel Hearne. Hearne wrote that, quote, one of the Indian wives, who for some time had been in a consumption, had for a few days past become so weak as to be incapable of traveling, which among those people is the most deplorable state to which a human being can possibly be brought. Whether she had been given over by the doctors, or that it was for want of friends among them, I cannot tell. But certain it is that no expedients were taken for her recovery, so that, without much ceremony, she was left unassisted to perish above ground. Though this was the first instance of the kind I had seen, it is the common and indeed the constant practice of those Indians. For when a grown person is so ill, especially in the summer, as not to be able to walk and too heavy to be carried, they say it is better to leave one who is past recovery than for the whole family to sit down by them and starve to death, well knowing that it cannot be of any service to the afflicted. On those occasions, therefore, the friends or relations of the sick generally leave them some victuals and waters, a little bit of food, and if the situation of the place will afford it, a little firing, like something to light a fire with. When those articles are provided, the person to be left is to be acquainted with the road which the others intend to go, and then after covering them well up with deerskins, etc., they take their leave and walk away crying. Sometimes persons thus left recover and come up with their friends to wander about till they meet with other Indians, whom they accompany till they again join their relations. Instances of this kind are seldom known. The poor woman above mentioned, however, came up with us three several times after having been left in the manner described. At length, poor creature, she dropped behind, and no one attempted to go back to search for her. So that's the end of the little passage. So there is this practice, and you might have heard in India, not Native American, in India, in certain places, there are something, for instance, there are practices like widow burning, right? Where a widow, after a man dies, she jumps into a fire with him. And, people like to downplay this kind of thing, but it does happen. It's a common practice, or it has been for most of, for thousands of years in many places. And this kind of practice with the Native Americans is a common occurrence when you go on a long journey, which was common. for many tribes. They were most Indians were traveling. That's what they did. They were nomadic, and if you couldn't keep up, and they didn't have the means to keep you, they weren't all just going to sit around and wait and die. They had to get to the buffalo. So part of it was, whatever they were eating, and so they had to make the tough decision or really it wasn't even a decision. It was just, this is what you do. This is, there's a respect for travel. And if you can't, in their culture, and if you can't travel, then you're not really fully alive anyway. And so we just have to let you die. And it was basically like just letting you die. But there's something that Wordsworth, and in decrying a biblical sense of forsaken, there's something that he's trying to also say that's similar to the female vagrant, the woman who is kicked out of her ancestral home in Britain, right? And then her husband is drafted into the war against America, and then he dies, and her children die, and then she travels around and she wanders around Britain as a gypsy, but the gypsies are thieves, and she doesn't want to be a thief, so she leaves them, and she just kind of wanders around, walking, living off whatever falls off the land, just kind of hopeless and aimless and lost and forsaken and a vagrant. And this forsaken Indian woman, who's completely diametrically opposed to the other woman in so many ways. She's not godful. She doesn't believe in a God. And yet Wordsworth is trying to claim that there is a universal requirement for these people, that we cannot forsake them. I don't care if you're Native American or you're British or you're French or you're Eskimo. It doesn't matter who you are. There are certain things you don't do, and that's abandoning children and women. So this is kind of a universal theme that he's kind of expressing here. Now, he doesn't, again, his goal, he's an artist, so his goal isn't to, start a cause and raise money for it. His goal is to help you see her plight and what it's like, and to make you empathize with who she is and what she's experienced as a human. And he's doing this to Western Europeans. So he's, or British European. So he's not going to, learn the language of this Native American tribe, put it in her language, which is a modern thing. This is what we would have to do today, is we'd have to use the kind of lingo that they had, the kind of idioms that they would use. But Wordsworth argues that he wants to go into the low, rustic elements of life and color it with imagination, and of course with the literary flair that a great literary writer, he doesn't say it in those terms, but that's essentially what he's saying, that they would use. So put it into, and this is what was so dramatically controversial about a lot of the stuff he was doing, is he was using the language, the meter of like epic poetry and great ballads of the English tradition. But he was also elevating it with his own abilities and strengths as a poet. And so he's kind of elevating something that didn't deserve to be elevated, like an Indian woman didn't deserve to be elevated to the high sounding language of, British Europeans and their poetry. Well, let's go through this real briefly and, think about what is going on with the actual poem. So it starts, before I see another day, oh, let my body die away. So it starts off with this poem that she wants to die. And, she talks about how in sleep I heard the northern gleams. That's the aurora borealis. And remember, in the preparatory comments, Wordsworth says that the northern lights, as the same writer informs as the northern lights vary their position in the air. They make a rustling and crackling sound. That's what he's referring to. The stars, they were among my dreams. In sleep did I behold the skies. I saw the crackling flashes drive, and yet they are upon my eyes. And yet I am alive. Before I see another day, I will let my body die away. So she's describing how she's kind of in this state of between, her body's dying. She's already sick with consumption. Right? We don't know that, but we know that her body is dying. I'll let my body die away. And she's kind of seeing things, but there's a reality to what she's seeing. It's also the northern lights that she's seeing. In sleep did I behold the skies. I saw the crackling flashes drive, and yet they are upon my eyes. So even though she's closed her eyes, she can see them. She knows she's alive, but she's in this kind of weird limbo state. And then she talks about my fire is dead. So her fire is out. And this is, of course, going to be metaphorical. So it's her own inner life fire and the fire that kept her alive. But it's also probably, you could think of it literally as a fire. So, probably has both sense. It knew no pain, yet is it dead, and I remain. All stiff with ice, the ashes lie, and they are dead, and I will die. So again, that's the flame, that's the literal fire that she had. It's dying down, and it's ash, and ice, because they're way up north and it's cold. But it's also a metaphor for her inner fire. When I was well, I wished to live. Right? When she was well, she had desires and goals and aspirations for clothes. So what did she live for? For clothes, for warmth, for food, and fire. Okay. But they to me no joy can give, no pleasure now, and no desire. So those material desires, the pleasures that she felt, can't really help her anymore. Doesn't matter. Like having them fulfilled doesn't help her now. Right? All she wants now is something else. Then here contented will I lie, alone I cannot fear to die. Alas, you might have dragged me on another day, a single one. So now this next stanza is about being dragged by her family one more day. Just like, why couldn't you drag me along with you and let me die with you? Right? And that's part of the tragedy of this whole thing is like, I once read, and this is like one of the, sad things. If you think about it as a human, how sad it is to just kind of lie in your bed alone and die. Just knowing you're going to die and you're all alone. And this maybe sounds callous in relation to this, but I was reading that one of the saddest things for a veterinarian is putting down a dog, and what they experience often is, the dog knows, senses something's wrong, and what they always do, and the veterinarians notice of them, is that they always look around as though they're looking for their owner. And, so it's why the veterinarians say, just stay with your dog, even though it's hard for you. As there's something about loneliness and death, and we all know this, like, oh my God, you're such a bitch, you're going to die alone. Right? Like that's the deepest insult, is that your whole life is going to be ruined and you're going to die alone. And there's nothing worse than that. And that's the whole state of this woman right now. She is in this state of dying alone. There's literally no one around, and she knows she's going to die. And it's like that is a tragedy. I mean, it's an intense tragedy. Too soon despair over me prevailed. Too soon my heartless spirit failed. So heartless means dejected. So she's been rejected. Her heart is down. She's sad about this because she feels rejected, of course. Her spirit has failed her now. When you were gone, my limbs were stronger, and oh, how grievously I rue, or rue like regret, like how grievously I regretted that afterwards, a little longer, my friends, I did not follow you. So for strong and without pain I lay, my friends, when you were gone away. So she was kind of complaining to herself almost that, well, I also could have just straggled along as much until I just died or something, like as much as I could. Right. And so I could have just followed them. Why didn't I just follow them until I died? Why did I have to stay here? Now she goes into this really sad moment with her child. My child, they gave you to another, a woman who was not your mother. When from my arms my babe they took, on me how strangely did he look. So it's a male baby. He looked, so picture this woman lying there dying of consumption. They put deer skin on her. She's gonna, they left her like some kindling to light a fire. They gave her a little bit of meat and some water, and then they take her baby from her, and the baby looks at her in shock and awe and terror, maybe. How strangely did he look? Through his whole body something ran. A most strange something did I see. As if he strove to be a man, that he might pull the sledge for me. And then he stretched his arms, how wild, oh mercy, like a little child. Now there's a tragedy in this here too is what she senses or she projects onto her little boy is that he has this sense, and we don't know how old he is. It says babe, but in her mind, he wants to all of a sudden be a, virile 19-year-old man who can strap a sledge to his back and just drag her along. And this made me think of Cleobis and Biton, two ancient Greeks who strapped their mother to their backs, or their oxen died, so they put her in the sled and they ran to the festival that was very important to them, and they were good sons, and they died when they got there, perfect specimens, perfectly adult grown, fully idealized men, and they accomplished their goal. They died and were created in statues. Famous, I believe it's called a Curic statue, based on the supposed artist, sculptors, the word I was looking for. And he, so that's what she kind of visualizes, that this boy, her boy, has that look. Although he probably doesn't in reality, it's what she's projecting onto him, right, in her state. And remember, we're kind of led to this at the beginning when we see that there's, the Aurora Borealis, and she's in a dream. So she's in a kind of state of chaos, and her mind is flaring in a certain way. And so she sees this. She sees, her son, she sees that idea in her son that he wants to grow, be a full man, and protect her. But he can't. He's a little child. Next stanza is, my little joy, my little pride, in 2 days more I must have died. Then do not weep and grieve for me. So she's saying, in 2 days, I would have died anyway. Even if I walked with you, I would have, if I made myself walk, I would have died. I feel I must have died with thee, with you. I feel I must have died with you. That's what she wants. Oh, wind that over my head are flying. So she's describing the wind over her head. The way my friends their course did bend, I should not feel the pain of dying. Could I with you a message send? So it wouldn't be so bad if I could send you a message, if I could speak to you one last time. But she says, too soon, my friends, you went away, for I had many things to say. Right? So they left her. She's basically arguing, complaining, grieving that she was going to die, but they left her too soon. They should have kept her for at least another day or two, and she would have died with them. And she says, I'll follow you across the snow. You travel heavily and slow. In spite of all my weary pain, I'll look upon your tents again. My fire is dead and snowy white. Right now she's describing the scene. The water which beside it stood. The wolf has come to me tonight, and he has stolen away my food. So she's out of food, she's out of water. Forever left alone am I. Then for what reason should I fear to die? So she has no reason to fear to die anymore. It's all moot. My journey will be shortly run. I shall not see another sun. I cannot lift my limbs to know if they have any life or no. So she's so cold, sick, dying. She's just kind of sitting there, lamenting this, but she's so weak that she can't even lift her arms to find out if there's any life in them anymore. She can't even do it. So that assumes that there is no life in them. My poor forsaken child. So her only fear is that she was forsaken by her friends and family, the Indians, but she cares about the forsaken child, right? Because she feels like she forsake her child. If I for once could have you close to me, with happy heart, I then would die. And my last thoughts would happy be, I feel my body die away. I shall not see another day. So it's a harrowing tale of a woman who, of a human being who, due to customs, is left to die. And this is one of the things that is a common theme amongst the Romantics, and Wordsworth is one of the first ones that really brings this out. And of course, he's also putting the flair of the Romantics that is explicitly focused on the interior world of this woman. So she goes into this kind of a trance. It's like she's in a daze. She's in a, psychological stupor, and she starts to lament these certain things, and she starts to believe something, even though we find out really she probably can't even move. Or maybe she can move and walk, temporarily for a couple of days, and then she can't, or for a couple hours, and then she is done. And, so there's something also tragic in that, given the circumstances of the Native Americans, or these Indians, they didn't really have much of a choice either. And so there's also a horrible reality to it, that they didn't really have much of a choice to do it. And so we can also take this as kind of a civilized man living in, this era where there's the French Revolution, but there's big ships, there's, medicine is starting to come into play, or at least, they have doctors that are capable of doing, repairing you a little bit. They understand a little bit more about the importance of food, and, they can build houses. So the steam engine has been invented. The train has been, so they're living in this civilized, growing economy. And these Native Americans, these Indians, do not live in that. And yet they still, in the advanced civilization, there's still female vagrants, mad mothers, idiot boys, Cumberland beggars, Simon Lees, old men traveling. There's still these people who are forsaken, destroyed, distraught, wandering, sad, alone, devastated till death. But even in these uncivilized areas, like these Indians who don't have any of this technology, even they have customs that if you can't live up to these standards, you're gone. And so what he's really trying to attack, because again, Wordsworth is purely an individualist. So the customs are a problem for him insofar as they interfere with the life and the flourishing and the happiness of this person. And what he's focused of this individual, and what he's focused on, of course, is the tragedy of a forsaken woman. And that is a theme, again, is the forsaken child and woman, which happens over and over again. And so there is an attack on kind of the masculine ways of fighting, although he also of like living in a society. So there is a kind of attack on that way of existing, because he says, well, don't forget about the women. I mean, that's kind of what he's saying here, is they get forsaken. Okay, so that is the complaint of a forsaken Indian woman. And we're almost at an end of lyrical ballads. We have The Convict and then Tintern Abbey. So stay tuned.